next year. One of the things that came out of that, though, out of that conference, and we had an opportunity to present about clean cities and talk to a lot of you individually about the program and what we do, was a lot of interest in a lot of the online tools and resources we have through our Alternative Fuels Data Center, or as we refer to it, the AFDC. And so that's really was the nexus for this call today, and that's what Alexis is going to spend the bulk of the time with. So I'm just going to try to take a few minutes here and go through a handful of slides just to go ahead and show you folks who may not be familiar with our program what Clean Cities is all about, a little bit of history of the program, talk about some of the involvement we already have had for quite some time with many of our Clean Cities coalitions around the country and National Association of Regional Councils, and then turn it over to Alexis. But I guess before I'll do that, I'll answer and maybe try to answer a question that I know I've gotten a lot of calls from various Clean Cities stakeholders around the country since the election, and it's all the same question. Well, what's going on in Washington and what's happening at the Department of Energy? And the answer is, like everybody else, believe it or not, we really don't know. So as you can imagine, waiting to see who the new Secretary of Energy will be, and once that person is approved and in line, and once they bring in their staff, my guess it's probably going to be well into next year before we kind of know the direction of things around here. Having said that, I will say I think the one good thing about what we do here in the Clean Cities program and what we do in the Office of Vehicle Technologies here at the DOE, which is where our program is housed, is it's all about energy efficiency in transportation, regardless if it's personal vehicles, if it's mobility, if it's heavy-duty Class 8 trucks going cross-country. How do we make that those various transportation sectors more efficient? And so at the end of the day, we always kind of come down to kind of that infamous three-legged stool you hear about, and ours is really what are we doing to impact the country's energy, economic, and environmental security? And I think some administrations may play up one of those pillars or one of those legs of the stool more than others, but I think at the end of the day, the good news is we've got something for everybody to love. If it's climate change is a concern, we certainly address that, and if the concern is why do we have the 5th Fleet of the U.S. Navy at the Strait of Hormuz trying to protect oil, we've got something there as well. So having said that, I guess maybe I say that not as an expert, but just saying it, I think that again, we've got something for both sides of the aisle. So hopefully our mission doesn't change much. And I've only been around here about 6 years, so I haven't been through an administration change from one party to another. But it seems like that at the end of the day is kind of what happens. We do tend to stay the course. There may be an emphasis, as I said, on maybe some of those different legs of the stools, or maybe more of an emphasis on wanting to see one technology or one alternative fuel. But I think we still move ahead with kind of our all of the above approach. So enough of my pontificating. I've told you everything I know about what's happening with the transition here in D.C. Let me get going here quick so I don't cut into Alexis's time. So the Clean Cities program, we've been around for, it'll be coming up here in another year or so on 25 years, which seems hard to believe. The program was born out of the Energy Policy Act of 1992, which, again, talking about energy security, was all about oil, because that was right after the first Gulf War, for those of us old enough to remember. And so the Energy Policy Act of 1992 said there should be a program that DOE develops that helps the transportation sector reduce its dependence on oil. And so we really kind of have again another three-pronged approach to that. One is to be able to replace oil with other alternative fuels, maybe just to reduce oil use in transportation by using other fuel economy measures like idle reduction or right sizing of fleets, and one is just to try to eliminate it altogether. And we do this through the alternative fuels you see listed on the right-hand side of the screen. Those are all the alternative fuels that are defined by the Energy Policy Act of 1992. But again, we also do it with other fuel economy measures, with idle reduction initiatives, or we see a lot of fleets who are doing what we call right sizing. There was an interesting story not too long ago. One of the big national partners we work with, Time Warner Cable, was using F-250 pickup trucks, and I forget how many thousands of those they had in their fleet. And the new fleet manager came in and asked the question, well, why are we using F-250s? And the answer was, well, that's the only truck we can fit all the equipment on that we need. And they said, well, have we tried it on an F-150? Well, yeah, it's not going to work. Well, they tried it on an F-150, and lo and behold, they could stow all the equipment they needed on an F-150. So suddenly they did away with the F-250s, got the Ford F-150 with the EcoBoost engine, and saw their fuel economy, which was somewhere around 9 to 10 miles per gallon on the F-250, now jump up to about 14 to 15 miles per gallon on the F-150. So we do support those types of things as well, but at the end of the day, kind of our real emphasis is on replacing the oil use with alternative fuels. We've got a framework here of about 4 or 5 different pots that we delve into that make up our program. Going kind of clockwise from the top left-hand corner from that 11 o'clock position is local and national partnerships. So at the local level, we have our network of Clean Cities coalitions, which I'll show you more here in a moment. Nearly 100 Clean Cities coalitions across the country, and these are really our local experts on the ground. Each one of our coalitions has a coordinator, and those are the folks who really pull together all the right stakeholders and develop all the relationships with all the folks you need to get these alternative fuel projects off the ground, to get vehicles deployed, and to get in refueling or recharging infrastructure. At the national level here, we try to do some things on a more broad-based approach. I mentioned briefly Time Warner Cable. We have a program called the National Clean Fleets Partnership, which is a way for us to better work with many of these large fleets like the UPSs, like the Time Warner Cables, AT&Ts, and some of those folks who have, many of them, 20, 30, in the case of UPS, 60,000 plus vehicles around the country. And so it's a little bit harder to try to make that connection for, say, the coordinator and maybe Indianapolis to, okay, how do we get into this big corporate fleet? So that's what we try to do at that level. We also have some programs where we work with the national parks and others, but we do that in a parallel approach to make sure that at the end of the day we're getting the Clean Cities messaging and the tools and resources into these fleets, whether it's a large national fleet or a local fleet in your area. Excuse me. Going over to the 1 o'clock position, information and education, that's what Alexis is going to talk about today. I think I'll just leave it with what one of the things we're very proud of and we hear a lot about is that I think the Clean Cities program has become that trusted source or that unbiased source that a fleet or a consumer can come to really learn about a particular fuel or technology, to understand more about maybe some of the challenges, to get help when there is some technical issues that need to be addressed, that again, we don't have a dog in a fight in terms of us trying to preach and say you must use this fuel or this technology. It's about really trying to make sure that those fuels and technologies get used in the right vehicles and the right application that's going to bring the biggest benefit to the consumer or to the fleet. Moving down to that 4 or 5 o'clock position, I kind of touched that on that already, technical and problem-solving assistance. So we do have a number of ways we address that. We actually are probably one of the few programs around that actually has a technical response service that you can either email or make a phone call to, and I think probably Alexis will touch on that. So we've got something, if you need a quick answer or help with something, we can address that. And we also have some Tiger teams who we can bring in some industry experts, again, who don't have a dog in a fight, but can come in to help deal with a technical issue or problem that a fleet may be having with their vehicles or with their fueling station or both. So we can really address everything from soup to nuts there. And then over in that 7 o'clock position, the one everybody likes, competitively awarded financial assistance. We always try to, depending on Congress and how kind they are to us in terms of budgets, have money available for competitive grants to really help do a number of things. One is to help get more vehicles on the road, more alternative fuel or advanced technology vehicles on the road, to help get into refueling and recharging infrastructure, but also to back it up a step and to say, okay, well, what are some of the hurdles to faster deployment of vehicles and greater consumer acceptance and adoption? And then whether those are market challenges or policy issues, we've tried to address those with several funding opportunities over the past few years. Moving on, and in that vein of talking about kind competitive financial assistance. We're proud that on our last funding opportunity we had, that the National Association of Regional Councils was a recipient of one of 2 awards that really got to aggregated purchasing. You know, one of the things you hear when you talk to people in the alternative fuel industry is we do know that these vehicles, whether it's on the light duty side or if it's the heavy duty Class 8 tractors, the incremental cost of an alternative fuel or advanced technology vehicle compared to its gasoline or a diesel counterpart still carries a pretty hefty incremental cost. And we're seeing that come down in some niches where there's been, you know, it's taken many years for a lot of vehicles to come out and for the manufacturers to see those economies of scale. But, you know, one of the things we've always wondered about is, as the industry has, is, well, how do we speed that up? How do we, you know, not wait for these economies of scale to come year after year? How do you develop some innovative programs that that can be attractive to the OEMs or maybe even some further component manufacturers upstream of the vehicle to help reduce those costs? And so NARC was one of those, 16 partners, including many Clean Cities coalitions, for an almost $2 million project. And that project just got kicked off the ground here late summer. Trev Hall from DOE's NETL lab and Linda Bluestein, one of my colleagues here at DOE, are managing that project. But I know there's been a lot of hard work going on there, and I think we're going to see some neat results out of that. So we're excited about working with you folks on that award. I mentioned our network of Clean Cities coalitions. As you can see, we bill it as nearly 100. I think officially we have about 86 or 87 coalitions, and those other ones that make up the balance are kind of coalitions in training, if you will. You know, our goal isn't to see how many dots we can have on the map just to fill up the map, but our goal is really to have coalitions in areas where it's really been demonstrated that there's a need, that there is already some momentum from stakeholders who want to see a coalition and realize there could be a benefit. So when somebody says, hey, we think we want to come on and establish a coalition in this city, it's really a long process. It takes about 2 or 3 years for them to really, you know, in essence, kind of show us that they've built the business case and they have the stakeholders behind them and the momentum to really make that project go. One I'll call out in particular that falls under the topic of our conversation today is the one in North Florida in Jacksonville. Those folks had been working for, gosh, probably 2 or 3 years, I guess, on getting that coalition put together and getting it off the ground, and they just had their official designation earlier this year. I believe it was in the spring of this year. So congrats to the folks in North Florida. They've worked very hard, and they've got a lot of good things going on. So that kind of gives you a flavor for how it works. I won't have you count all the blue dots. I'll make it easier and say that we have right now 17 coalitions that are housed in regional councils, and that's the quick listing of them. We did acknowledge them at the conference this past summer and sent some letters of recognition and thanks out to them for all their hard work. Again, in the interest of time, so we get moving ahead, this is probably pretty evident to everybody. You know, so what are the benefits of being housed in a COG? Well, from our standpoint, I think we see financial sustainability. You know, our coordinators, while they volunteer for this position, it's not a pure volunteer job. There is some funding from from DOE to the Clean Cities coalitions, but that's based on some certain deliverables they have to do in terms of providing alternative fuel costs from retail stations on a quarterly basis, and the big lift there is really at the end of the year for our program metrics on collecting the data on the fleets in their regions in terms of what their impact has been on petroleum reduction, greenhouse gas reduction, and how many alternative fuel vehicles were they able to get on the road. And so it makes it tough for a coalition to self-sustain, but when they're housed in a regional council, certainly it takes that burden off of it. And I think the nice thing from us we see is just the connection that you folks have to local government officials, and also the fact that transportation planning is something that all of you are involved with, and so there's a real good natural fit there. And hopefully from the host organization benefits, and hopefully you agree with these, but if you don't, if there's something missing or something we need to work on, let us know about that. But we think the one thing we have is access to that network of Clean Cities coalitions. You know, those nearly 100 coalitions out there, there's probably not a a question or a challenge or a problem that they haven't encountered with one of their stakeholders and haven't been able to come up with a solution to. So I think we've got a good way to really tap into a lot of knowledge out there to help overcome any hurdles or challenges you might be facing in your area. And the last thing is really about promotion. We've got some great relationships with Motor Week, which is shown actually worldwide, but it's shown throughout all the PBS stations in the U.S. and also on the Velocity channel, but it's shown on the Armed Forces Network. So we've got that and a lot of other ways to help promote the good work and the success stories that you folks have. I'm just going to breeze through these real quick so we can get to Alexis, but just if these look familiar, you probably saw them if you were in Salt Lake City last summer, but it just shows some of the coalitions. I mentioned the greenhouse gas or the gasoline gallons displaced and the greenhouse gases reduced through the Clean Cities efforts, because those are our metrics and how we're measured. And so I'll just kind of page through these, but you can see the impact there, and these are significant numbers, and I think it really illustrates the great work and the hard work that everybody's doing at the local level with the program. So again, hats off to all of those people for their hard work and for their dedication and really helping us as the Clean Cities program reach our goals, because this is what our management looks at, and this is how the success of what we do is measured. So again, thanks to all those folks. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to stick around for the entire webinar, but here's all my contact information. So if there are questions that you have that I have that you would like some answers to, feel free to reach out to me, or suggestions you might have, what have you. Please feel free to get in touch with me. And likewise, Sandra Loy from NET or from NREL is on our call, and Sandra will be taking some notes as well. So if there's some bigger questions we need to get back to the group on, we can answer those as well. So hope I haven't rambled on too long. Thanks so much for your time. Thanks again for allowing us to work with you the way we do. I think it's a great relationship that is continuing to grow and get stronger. And with that, I will turn it back over to Cameron.
Thank you very much, Mark. I'll turn it over to Alexis now.
Okay. Okay, 1 second. All right, can you see my screen?
Yep.
Okay. So that was a really great introduction from Mark, and he touched on some of the things that I'm going to cover today, but like I said, a good introduction to these topics. So I'm going to share some information on a variety of tools and resources available through Clean Cities. But first, I did want to mention the Clean Cities Technical Response Service that Mark mentioned. This is a service that my team at ICF supports. We are available to answer any question you might have about the Clean Cities portfolio items that Mark discussed, from general to very technical inquiries. We like to say we're a one-stop shop to make you look smart about alternative fuels. We can be reached by email or phone, which the information is right here, and I'll also put it up at the end of the presentation. Though it's important to note that we're not a live answering service. We listen to voicemails and read emails frequently, and we respond within 48 hours. If you need a response faster than that, feel free to let us know, and we'll do our best to get back to you. The green box outlines on the right outlines our knowledge base, which, as I said, aligns pretty closely with the Clean Cities portfolio. I did want to note the last bullet there, though. We have access to a number of industry experts, and if we don't know the answer to your question, we likely know somebody who does. Again, something that Mark mentioned was the Tiger teams. This service can provide more in-depth assistance to Clean Cities coalitions and their partners that encounter barriers in deploying alternative fuel vehicles. So if you've exhausted all the other resources to solve a problem related to alt fuels, the Tiger teams is a great resource. They can assist at any point in the project or product life cycle, from concept to closure. This includes fleet analysis, station placement, implementing a bidding process, identifying quality technologies, making sure the work is performed to specifications, and addressing operation and maintenance issues. John Gonzalez at NREL is the appropriate contact for that, so you can reach out to him, and his email address is here on this slide. So as promised, I'm going to switch gears into the Alternative Fuels Data Center. The link is here and also will be on that final contact information slide. I'm going to run through several tools today pretty quickly, and because we don't have a lot of time and there's a ton to share. But if we will have a question and answer period at the end, but you should also feel free to reach out to me at the end after the presentation, and I'm happy to run you through any of these tools or your specific questions. So without further ado, here is the AFDC. This is the home page, and I'm going to start with a quick tour of some of the main features on this page before we jump into some of the specific tools. So across the top green toolbar, this is a great place to start for links to some of the most popular tools. The first is this Fuels and Vehicles tab, which also can be accessed by clicking on one of these nozzles here. So clicking into natural gas, for instance, you can see that there's basic information as well as benefits and considerations, information about stations infrastructure development, vehicles including emissions, and loss and incentives. And this information is available for all the fuel types that Mark discussed. Next is the Conserve Fuel pages, which cover petroleum reduction methods in the Clean Cities portfolio. Others besides the alternative fuels, so idle reduction, parts and equipment, and that would include things like telematics or low rolling resistance tires, maintenance practices, driver behavior changes, fleet right sizing, and system efficiency, which gets at those smart mobility topics that are really popular these days. So the next few items across this toolbar are tools that we're going to go into more detail about later in the webinar. Station locations, laws and incentives, maps and data, case studies. This publications tab I won't go into in detail, but it provides search capabilities of relevant and vetted publications about alt fuels, and that includes Clean Cities, fact sheets, reports, guidebooks. It's really a wealth of information of those sorts of publications. So I encourage you to take a look. So from here we'll go to this Tools tab. And so if you were going to bookmark just one page, I would actually recommend this one, afdc.energy.gov/tools. And while I suggest you explore the whole AFDC, this is where you can find all the tools and calculators sort of in one place. They're organized by calculators, interactive maps, and then data searches. So I'm going to go talk about a few of these tools specifically. Let's start in the upper left corner here with the vehicle cost calculator. So this tool is specific to light-duty vehicle models available from original equipment manufacturers or OEMs. Though users can enter a custom vehicle if they know the purchase price, fuel type, and fuel economy, and this link right here is where you would do that. The outputs of the tool are fuel use in gallons or kilowatt hours in the case of electricity, annual fuel cost, annual operating costs, which would include the cost of fuel, but also things like maintenance and tires and license and registration, the cost per mile, and the annual greenhouse gas emissions. So quickly, let's start by comparing a couple Ford vehicles. So for instance, the Ford Fusion plug-in, and I'll compare that to its conventional counterpart. So you just add those two vehicles. As you can see, the tool populates with purchase price information, MSRP information, and then fuel economy information. And like every default that I'm going to sort of talk about in this tool and several tools, you should certainly feel free to update these, and you're encouraged to update these according to your own sort of parameters for your own vehicle. So things like this doesn't include the up to $7,500 tax credit for federal tax credit for plug-in vehicles. So you might want to factor that into your total purchase price, that sort of thing. And scrolling down, you can enter information about your driving use, the number of trips that you make a week, and then other trips. For a plug-in vehicle, they're going to ask you for your state so that you can have accurate electricity price information. And then for a plug-in hybrid, it's going to ask you how often you charge a day, because that gets at how much electricity you're going to use versus gasoline. So keeping all the defaults in here, we will click Results. And you can see on this table at the top here with getting at all those outputs that I mentioned, and you can actually see graphs of each of these items if you click underneath. And then this cumulative cost of ownership by year. And what you see here is the tool actually defaults to a 5-year loan period, which is why the bend in the curve here. And then you start to see that crossover of your return on investment around 7 or 8 years. So, so that's just an example of how you might use this tool. So we'll go back to our tools page and into the petroleum reduction planning tool, or what we like to call PREP. So where the vehicle cost calculator is targeted to consumers or specific vehicle decisions, this tool is geared towards a fleet with a petroleum reduction goal. So it allows fleets to build a plan to achieve that goal. So the plan can include vehicle replacements, which would be something like replacing a conventional vehicle with an alternative fuel vehicle, but also, similar to what Mark discussed, replacing an inefficient vehicle with one with higher fuel economy. Using alternative fuels in existing vehicles, so deciding to use biodiesel in a diesel vehicle, for instance. Reducing idling, reducing vehicle mileage, and driving more efficiently, which may involve a change in driver behavior. So the tool will then calculate progress towards your petroleum reduction goal in the graph to the right here, as well as the commensurate greenhouse gas reduction. So just quickly, say your fleet uses 100,000 gallons of petroleum a year and you're looking for a 10% reduction. You would add that goal and you see that your dot here jumps up to 10,000 gallons. And then you could start, adding things to your plan. So say you wanted to replace a mid-sized gasoline car, again, you could change these defaults as appropriate. With a mid-sized car that uses, can use ethanol, and you're going to use E85 100% of the time. So you start to see how this graph is going to come together. So you're working towards, you've got a little bit towards your goal on the petroleum reduction, and then you can also see where you stand as far as your greenhouse gas reduction. So it's also important to note that the National Renewable Energy Lab and Argonne National Lab will be taking a close look at this tool, as well as the next one that I'm going to discuss in the next year or so, to revise and better align the two. So if you have suggestions or improvements really for any tool, but especially these two, after you give them a try, please do let us know. So that prompt reminds me that you can actually save your plan and go back and look to it in PREP. Once you can add things to it later, you can see where you're at, that kind of thing. So the next thing we're going to talk about is a fleet tool. This one is a spreadsheet-based tool, so I'm going to click over into Excel here. So a fleet is similar to the previous tools in that the outputs are financials, energy use, and emissions, but the calculations are more robust, and it actually allows users to compare several different types of vehicles. So I'm going to quickly demonstrate one scenario and show you some of the outputs, but for this one, I really do encourage you to check out the Clean Cities website for a recent webinar on A-Fleet, because there really is so much here that you need a full webinar. So we'll jump right into a quick example, though. So you're going to start by entering your location, your city, and your state and your county. And then let's say here, since we focused on light duty earlier, we'll go down to this heavy duty box, and notice we're on the inputs tab here. So let's stick with transit buses. You could kind of focus on a different vehicle type, but we'll stick with transit buses here. And say we're comparing 10 diesel transit buses with 10 CNG buses. And anything in yellow here are inputs that you can change, really anything in yellow or orange. And we, like I said, really encourage you to do so. So if you know that your annual vehicle mileage, or the fleet that you're working with, their vehicle mileage, the fuel economy, the purchase price, you can update those. Similarly, the fuel cost. And as you go down here, your expected ownership, amount of time you're going to own the vehicle, planned ownership. And then at the bottom, you can update your feedstock source. So let's say in this case, we're going to be fueling those CNG vehicles with landfill gas. So based on those inputs, you can go to the payback tab, and this is where you would start entering more information about, say, you're planning to build a station, and you would change these inputs to these drop downs to provide more detail about the station that you're planning to develop, so on and so forth. And then you would go over to the Payback Outputs tab, and this is where you start to see information about annual petroleum use on a life cycle basis, so for diesel and CNG, your greenhouse gas emissions, diesel and CNG, and then your air pollutant emissions. At the bottom, you can scroll down and you can see these, excuse me, some of these outputs graphed. So this is helpful information if you're looking for a more visual look. And then total cost of ownership outputs are similar. You can see here what your total cost of ownership for your diesel vehicle versus CNG, and that includes things like financing and depreciation and fuel use, sort of across the board. And then you scroll down into some of these really helpful graphs to see things like cumulative cash flow for the two vehicle types. So that is a fleet. So going back to the AFDC and our tools page, we'll move over into the interactive maps column here and go into the station locator. So the station locator is also available across the top here on the green bar, like I said before. And this one is one of the most used tools actually on the AFDC and across DOE tools. It includes locations of public and private non-residential alternative fuel stations. And that includes all of the fuels in this drop-down list. So B20 and above, compressed and liquefied natural gas, E85, hydrogen, propane, and electric vehicle charging. So in the search bar, you could search by address, so something that's close to you or close to a fleet, but also by zip code or state. So again, let's stick with Colorado here. And let's say we want to look for electric vehicle charging in Colorado. So you can choose from that drop-down menu. And you can see the dots show up on the map. And there's also this download spreadsheet of matching stations, which allows you to download an Excel spreadsheet of all of those stations. And you can refine your search by clicking more search options. You could include private stations, because this search just defaults to public. You could include planned stations. You can start to drill down the specifics of your search. So say for electric vehicle charging, you just wanted to look at level 1, level 2 DC fast, connectors and outlet type, and network. So let's say here we're looking for DC fast chargers that can charge a Tesla vehicle. So you'll see as a result, you get the map again, but it's been whittled down to these 8 stations that include 50 total charging outlets. And if you click into one of these, you can see on the more details page a number of different, all the information that I showed you earlier that was searchable, as well as some other fields. One of the important things here is this last confirmed date. All of the stations in the database are updated or verified on an annual basis. So this date should be sometime in the last year, and you can sort of get a sense of when the last time it was verified. So I also wanted to point out for these fuel-specific fields, obviously they're specific to electricity, but across all fuel types, there are fuel-specific fields that you can search by. So for instance, if you just wanted fast fill CNG stations or just wanted E85 stations that offered mid-level blends, those sorts of fuel-specific fields are available across the board. So I wanted to draw your attention to the plan a route functionality. The starting and ending location here, you can type those in and find fueling stations along a route, and you can sort of limit how far off you want to go from your route. So here we've got default to 5 miles. I also wanted to draw your attention to this about the data page or button, which leads to the about the data page. You'll find this and assumptions buttons on a lot of the AFDC tools, and they're great for identifying information about like what's behind all of these calculations. What's in this case, what are the parameters for each field? How often is the data updated? That kind of thing. These buttons are really important and can provide some of that background information. So going back to our tools page, I'm going to move over into data searches and buzz through some of these tools pretty quickly. So vehicle search allows you to search for alternative fuel and advanced vehicles, and this is where the vehicle cost calculator allows you to search for OEM models. This is going to get, for light-duty vehicles, this is going to get more into a lot of the heavy-duty, though light-duty are included as well. So you can search by type, manufacturer, engine, system. Say here you're looking for propane school buses. So you could search school bus, and then you can actually whittle down that you want just propane models and search. And it's going to come up with all of the available propane models and provide some information and links to more information where it's available about the different models, a picture. So this is a really great tool for checking out to see what's available for some fleet vehicles. And over here on the right, you can sort of edit your search. So if you also wanted to start looking at CNG options too, you could add that in. All right, back to our tools page. I'm going to buzz into the laws and incentives search. So this tool provides information on state and federal laws and incentives related to alt-fuel vehicles, and it's also accessible across the top green bar here. So for instance, if you were looking for all of those laws and incentives in Colorado, you would go over here to the state button, click go, and it opens a list of all of the laws and incentives related to alt fuels in Colorado. Wanted to draw your attention to the fact that it has a last updated date here, similar to the station locator. Each of these pages is revisited on an annual basis, typically right after the state's legislative session ends. So we'll review all of the data in here, make sure it's still relevant, but also search all of the legislation that's passed in that year to see if there's anything that we need to add or remove based on that. So this one was last updated in June. You can actually click into one of these and see that it provides, in this case, this is a pretty long summary because it's a pretty complicated tax credit, but a summary of the incentive or the law, and then at the bottom you'll see links to additional information. So another feature on this is the search functionality, which is where we landed when we clicked over from the tools. So this is helpful if you're looking for examples or trends across the country. So for instance, you could look for biodiesel tax incentives available to a fleet purchaser or manager. So you would click within each of these columns, hit search, and it pops up with 1 federal and 7 state incentives that would be applicable to that search. And you can click into these, and it's going to lead you to the page similar to what I showed you for the Colorado PEV tax incentives. This also reminds me that the Colorado page is a similar page for all the federal laws, incentives, and regulations. So I encourage you to check those out. Other sort of features on the laws and incentives page are local examples. It's not a comprehensive database of local laws and incentives, but there are some examples here, as well as under the federal tab, you can find sort of a chronology of federal legislation related to alt fuels. And then over here on the right, you can find some case studies as well as policy briefs that summarize trends related to alternative fuel incentives and laws. Back to the tools page quickly. We're going to go to Find a Car here. This will actually lead you to fueleconomy.gov, which is a page that you may be familiar with, but I wanted to bring this to your attention. While it's helpful for fleets, this page is really geared towards consumers purchasing a light-duty vehicle. It's maintained by both DOE and EPA and allows users to compare different models based on their fuel economy, annual fuel costs, and other parameters. So going back to the tools page, the last sort of tool from this page that I'm going to show you is the state information pages. So looking, again, we'll stick with Colorado. You see that this page is your one-stop shop for information about a specific state. So a lot of the tools that we've already discussed today are sort of summarized here. So laws and incentives, fueling stations, clean cities coalitions that Mark discussed earlier. But it also draws information from other parts of the AFDC and the DOE website. So transportation fuel consumption, including some of the alternative fuels, fuel production in the state, regional fuel prices, bioenergy production, electricity sources in the state, and transportation projects in the state. So this is a page that you might be interested in checking out if you're looking for everything about your state in one place. So to finish out, I'm going to circle back to two tools that can be found on the green header here, but are not on the tools page. And the first is maps and data. So this page is a wealth of data, graphs, maps, and other figures related to clean cities. It's broken down into categories, which is this drop down here. You should definitely take some time to explore these, particularly if your job involves data analysis, trend analysis, that kind of thing, just to run through some of the tools and data sets that are available here. You can find a graph of growth of station locations over time, plug-in vehicle sales by model and year, greenhouse gas emissions by fuel type, global ethanol production over time, a heat maps of incentives and laws by state. So it's really a wealth of lots of different information. It would be impossible to go through all the graphs that are and maps and everything that are available here, but definitely come back and check it out. So last but certainly not least, we have the case study search. The AFDC includes a library of 250 case studies. That's also across this top bar, including web stories, videos, and reports, all related to alternative fuels. You can search by fuel and technology or applications here on the right, as well as keyword. So depending on what kind of project you're working on. So for instance, going back to the example that we used in the vehicle search, say you're looking for examples of propane school transportation projects. You're going to find 14 relevant case studies in the AFDC database. So for instance, you could click into this video, which is a Motor Week video, like what Mark mentioned earlier about Boston Public Schools using propane. Or maybe you want to check out this web story, which will provide a little bit more information, a short blurb about propane school bus use in a county in Minnesota. Or perhaps you want something a little bit more in-depth. So this document is a sort of more in-depth look at some case studies as well as high-level analysis about propane buses. So all of that can be found in the case studies database. So I will switch back to the slides here. Here's the contact information, all the websites that I discussed today, as well as the technical response service information, Mark's information again, as well as my direct contact information. So I can come back to this slide in a second. I did want to switch to this slide about questions. I'm happy to take questions about tools and resources. I think I'll defer to Cameron to how we're going to open up the lines for that. And feel free to ask questions about the program in general, and Sandra and I will field them as appropriate or pass them along to Mark. I also wanted to give those of you on the phone an opportunity to provide feedback on the second two questions here. So what other tools, resources, and information that you maybe didn't see today can Clean Cities provide that would be helpful? And that could be online calculators, fact sheets, guidebooks, technical assistance, anything really. And how can we continue this dialogue and work together in the future? So Cameron?
Thank you so much, Alexis. So we have about 15 minutes for questions. As a reminder, if you would like to ask a question, please do so by selecting the Raise Your Hand button on your control panel, or by typing a question into the questions box. So I'll just wait and see if anyone has any questions. Okay, we have a question from Virginia Mode. I'm going to unmute you right now so you can ask your question.
I don't know if you can hear me though.
We can hear you.
We can hear you.
Oh, great. Okay. What I wanted to ask is, see where there's pockets. I'm in Texas.
We can't hear you right now. I think you might be on speaker.
How about now? How about now?
It's still a little bit low.
Really? I don't know what I'm doing wrong. Okay, I don't know what I'm doing. Is there some place I can type the question? Hello?
Yeah, why don't you ask your question and see if we can hear you.
Okay. I see that there's pockets of infrastructure depending on what part of the nation you're at. There'll be propane on one side, CNG maybe in Texas, E85 in another. Are y'all doing any studies on possibly knowing what is best for the different, or, are we trying to make it one size fits all, or what are we doing?
So I sort of caught some of that question. Basically the geographic specificity of some of these fuels. You're wondering, what are we doing to streamline, or what are we doing to sort of cater to those different?
Both.
So NREL did an analysis that I'd be happy to send you if you want to type in your contact information on the different geographies, that are primed for different fuel types.
Okay.
But that's, part of what Mark discussed in the beginning is the importance, both politically and just in general, to a diversified portfolio, and the fact that there's no one silver bullet as far as alternative fuels go. And I think that that's one of the really special things about the Clean Cities program, is that we can cater. Like you said, one fleet might be really, have natural gas infrastructure right outside their door, and so they wouldn't have to invest all that money in CNG fueling. Maybe that's a great option for them, but if not, maybe propane would be a good option because the infrastructure might be a little less expensive. So I actually think the diversity is important, and a lot of the tools that I went over today sort of help a fleet understand what's going to work in your area and with your fleet. Sandra, anything else to add to that?
No, that was pretty much it. I just don't see us going to one thing like the overreaching use of petroleum, gas. So, now we're really, it's coming in pockets. I didn't know if if there was anything that you might see in or you think about the future that you think it'll go forward too.
Sorry, I'm having a hard time. You're going like sort of in and out, echoey. I'm having a hard
I'm sorry. I don't know how to think.
You can type your question in, maybe?
Yeah, Virginia, if you want to put a question in, I will come back to it. And we have another question right now from Wendy Defoe, so I will switch over to her. If you want to just type the question, I'll get back to that. All right, Wendy, Wendy, I cannot unmute you, so can you type in your question as well?
Wendy actually works closely with Sandra and me, so she probably just has something to add. So.
Okay. Yeah, I can't unmute her.
Are there any other questions?
Okay, so Virginia's question is, so we are pretty much accepting that we will have a different pocket of alternative fuel, no real one source of fuel like the overreaching of gasoline?
Yeah, so what I was saying before is the no one silver bullet sort of program line as far as Clean Cities goes. We're not picking one fuel. The Clean Cities program, and also the Energy Policy Act, that's the sort of basis for the program, is it's diverse in the alternative fuels that it sort of names. So no, at this point, Clean Cities itself is not picking, though, depending on who you talk to in different industries. Others are sort of advocating for one fuel or another.
Okay, we have another question from Daniel Jeffries. How can regional councils that don't house a coalition work with Clean Cities coalitions? Who should they contact if they want to get involved in their local coalition?
Sandra, do you want to field that one? Or?
Hi, yep, this is Sandra Loy from NREL. I support the Clean Cities program here at the national level. I'm located in Colorado. So certainly we want the connection to be made, and I think, I know Daniel's one of our coordinators in Oklahoma, and certainly want to connect with the regional councils, and if their current regional councils are not connected with their coalitions, we certainly highly recommend that they connect with their local coordinator. We have that information on our Clean Cities website, which is cleancities.energy.gov. I think Alexis is headed that way, and we do have a map, and actually right from the get-go, right on that homepage, you can type in a zip code or city and state and connect with your local coalition and talk about what they are doing there, and to connect with them. And they do typically host events and meetings, and that's a good opportunity to be part of what the local coalition is doing. And there is that coalition contact page. Thank you, Alexis, for pulling that up for everyone. And you can find in your local area, and if there isn't someone exactly in your specific city or region, a neighboring coalition can certainly help you. So I certainly recommend you go on to our Clean Cities website, where you can also learn more about the program, and also connect with your local Clean Cities coordinator.
Thank you, Sandra. Wendy's comment that she wanted to add was that the Tiger teams can help in the RFP stage or in the proposal review stage. If you're thinking about issuing an RFP for alternative fuels or infrastructure, we have experts who can help ensure you have a well-rounded, well-thought-out RFP and receive good proposals. Help available through Tiger teams is broad, so don't hesitate to ask if you need assistance.
Here's John's contact information for that.
And we have a follow-up question from Virginia. Is Clean Cities working with Exxon and other companies in fueling alternatives?
Sandra, do you want to take that one? Or?
You know, I'll have to defer. Maybe we can connect you to Mark Smith. You know, maybe not necessarily perhaps at some of the local levels. Maybe some of the coalitions might be connected. I don't know kind of off the top of my head, but maybe I'll defer to Mark Smith and we can connect you with him, and you could talk to him a little bit more about that and help answer that question.
Yeah, and the other thing is sort of Clean Cities is really a fleet and to the extent appropriate a consumer-based program. So I'm not sure exactly what sort of connections you were thinking of, but it's not really an advocacy organization or an advocacy program, and I'm not, or a regulatory program for that matter. So.
And we have another question from Robin Bancroft. Sorry, we're getting a lot of questions. 1 second. Is the Department of Energy involved at all with FHWA's recent announcement of 55 alternative fuel and electric charging network corridors that span 35 states? And if yes, do you have any information on how these corridors were chosen, and will there be more designated?
We have definitely been in contact with DOT about the corridors, and they used the fueling station locator in large part to designate some of those corridors. So definitely there's collaboration there. We can certainly put you in touch with those that are, I don't want to speak out of turn as far as the plans there, but I do think that written into legislation is that they will be able to designate corridors over time, and I don't know what the schedule for that is, but it's not a DOE effort per se, but we did assist in there with collaboration.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add also that a lot of our coalitions were involved with that and are within some of those designated corridors. And my understanding is that yes, for future they are looking at adding additional ones. I would certainly direct you to connect with the DOT contact directly, and we can, again, I'd happily share that information and pass that along, where you could talk to them more sort of about their future plans. Again, I don't want to speak out of turn either, but a lot of our coalitions have been involved, and we're part of that. So they're also good resources to kind of get an idea on how that selection worked out, as well as directly through our contact at the Department of Transportation. So if you want that information, we can get that from Cameron after and send you some additional information on that afterwards.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question. This one's from Tom Christoffel. Are there any states with related parallel programs? State fleets can be important in creating markets that localities can then purchase from, and then be a strategy for infrastructure's needed.
So state fleets are subject to regulations, actually, that come out of DOE, a separate program that requires state fleets to acquire a certain percentage of alternative fuel vehicles for the reasons that you exactly stated, Tom. So to sort of spur that market and to spur the infrastructure development. So that's the Energy Policy Act, State and Alternative Fuel Provider Program. If you're interested in, actually, the AFCC Laws and Incentives Database has information on that program. As far as state level programs, I mean, I know the Clean Cities coalitions around the country are working with their state fleets to the extent possible to collaborate on some of these issues. So you know, that's the whole idea behind having the coalitions around the country, and some of them are even located in state agencies, so have a really good avenue for connecting with their state fleet to talk to them about purchasing and that kind of thing. And also, just one more thing, a lot of states have requirements, their own requirements that go beyond the Energy Policy Act requirements both for purchasing and for actual fuel use. So do check those out in the Laws and Incentives Database to understand what sort of requirements your state fleet is held to.
And we just have one more quick question. Virginia just wanted to say your website looks terrific. She'll be spreading the link. And did you mention you had recorded presentations or webinars on your website?
Yep, the Clean Cities website has, it might take me a second, in the news and events over here in webinars are both upcoming webinars and recordings of previous webinars. And like it says, Sandra is the contact if you have suggestions for webinars that might be helpful in the future, as well as want access to previous webinars that aren't posted here.
Okay, well, I think we are out of time. Thank you, Alexis, Sandra, and Mark, for joining us. As a reminder, you will receive an email within the next 24 hours with a link to a video of the presentation. Thank you again for your attendance, and we look forward to your participation on future webinars. Have a great day.